The Tupac estate and my son and myself, we work very closely together, so it just made sense to put him in this game because his likeness and his spirit still lives on, and I just feel like it was so connected to what we're doing, so.
Yes, the very much assassinated and gone rapper Tupac Shakur. And I have no idea what to think about this other than this is the craziest timeline. And it's not Tupac appearing as Tupac, no, he's acting, he plays a character. Who actually has the rights to his estate? A lot of family drama.
New Tupac came. Just dropped a bombshell at the biggest gaming event of the year. And it didn't just break the internet, it cracked something open that hip-hop has been sitting on for decades. Because this story isn't just about a video game, it's about betrayal, billion-dollar empires, and a man who keeps profiting from a ghost he never made peace with. On June 5th, 2026, at Summer Game Fest, the gaming industry's biggest annual showcase, Snoop Dogg walked onto that stage in Los Angeles alongside the head of RGG Studio, the legendary Japanese developer behind the Yakuza and Like a Dragon franchise. Together, they dropped a trailer that nobody saw coming. Tupac Shakur, dead since 1996, was being digitally resurrected and placed inside a major video game called Stranger Than Heaven, published by SEGA.
I just saw the most hype gaming announcement I've ever seen. And RGG Studios sponsored this video, so I had to head back home to watch this trailer back with you guys. The Stranger Than Heaven trailer, they have some of the craziest characters cast in this with no AI whatsoever. They used archival footage and photographs along with like Snoop and Tupac's estate working together. I want to see so much of the combat in here. But the Pac!
Not as a cameo, not as a Pameo Watch Easter egg. As a full character named Amaru, which, if you didn't know, was Tupac's actual middle name given to him at birth. The game itself is a sweeping action-adventure spanning 50 years of Japanese history, following a Japanese-American outcast named Makoto Daito across 5 different cities and 5 distinct historical eras. It's one of the most ambitious projects RGG Studio has ever attempted. Slated for release on January 15th, 2027, Snoop himself appears in the game too, alongside his son Cordell Broadus, and is even co-writing the game's official theme song. And Snoop was quick to explain how Tupac ended up in there. He said he worked directly with Tupac's estate, Amaru Entertainment, to make it happen, calling it a natural fit. SEGA backed that up, releasing an official statement confirming the estate's full permission and ongoing supervision, and stressing that no artificial intelligence was used at any point.
The Tupac estate and my son and myself, we work very closely together, so it just made sense to put him in this game because his likeness and his spirit still lives on, and I just feel like it was so connected to what we're doing, so what y'all think?
Tupac's likeness was built from scratch using only real archival footage and photographs. On paper, it sounded airtight, but the internet had other ideas. Within hours of that reveal trailer hitting the internet, the backlash was fierce, and it came from everywhere. Twitch streamers, journalists, die-hard hip-hop fans, they all had something to say, and most of it wasn't kind. One prominent Twitch streamer named Omega Pro put it bluntly, posting that Snoop had a new business venture with Death Row Games and was using Tupac's likeness purely for monetary gain, calling the whole thing downright disgusting. Washington Post gaming reporter Gene Park went even further, saying he had never been more furious at his studio, and making the pointed argument that getting legal permission doesn't automatically make something morally right. And that sentiment spread fast. People weren't just uncomfortable with the game, they were questioning the person standing at the center of it all. Why was Snoop Dogg the one bringing Tupac back? Why was Snoop the one profiting? Not everyone felt that way, though. Some fans pushed back against the outrage, arguing that the estate signed off. Tupac's family was involved in the process, and that should be the end of the conversation.
It's very controversial. I don't blame you. I do blame, however, the people who are like, yeah, I'm just not gonna play the game because like I can't not look at this and be like, oh, it's Snoop Dogg, it's Tupac, because they can't just like suspend their disbelief because they see actors in the game playing.
RGG Studios head Masayoshi Yokoyama also addressed the controversy directly, acknowledging that placing Tupac's likeness in a video game 30 years after his passing would always be a divisive decision, but standing behind it regardless. The debate was real, it was loud, and it wasn't going away. But to understand why so many people were pointing the finger specifically at Snoop Dogg, you have to understand what these two men actually were to each other, and how it all fell apart. When Tupac Shakur was released from prison in late 1995 and signed to Death Row Records, Snoop Dogg was already the label's biggest star. His debut album, Doggy Style, had broken records, and he just survived a high-profile murder trial that had nearly ended his career before it started.
We, the jury in above entitled action, find the defendant, Calvin Brodus, not guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Tupac arrived with a completely different energy, aggressive, confrontational, ready for war with the East Coast. Snoop was smoother, more calculated, preferring diplomacy over open conflict. But despite those differences, the two built a genuine brotherhood. They recorded together, toured together, and became the two loudest voices representing West Coast rap at a time when that scene was dominating the entire music industry. They made two of America's most wanted together, and by all accounts, it was one of the most creatively electric partnerships in hip-hop at the time.
Fell in love with that. Me and him started hanging out, building a brotherhood with him.
We represent both sides of the game, the calm one and the relentless one.
So when actually I spoke to Suge and was like, we need to get him with us because he will make us better. And he gonna push me. We need his spirit here.
Then September 1996 happened, and it destroyed everything. With the East Coast versus West Coast feud burning hotter than ever, Snoop sat down for an interview on New York's Hot 97 radio station and said he had love for Diddy and Biggie, the same men Tupac was convinced had tried to have him killed. When Tupac heard that interview, he was done.
Biggie Smalls, he's an artist that I listen to his music. I love his work. There's no beef. It's nothing personal. I don't hate him and I don't disrespect him and I love what he do, and it's just me. I'm just a smooth, peaceful individual. I don't have beef with nobody right now, baby.
He stormed into Suge Knight's hotel room, furious. According to Knight, Pac was livid, saying he had put everyone on at Death Row, given everything he had to that label and to his people, and now Snoop was on the radio showing love to the enemy. Things got so tense that Snoop reportedly started carrying knives on a private flight, genuinely unsure what Tupac might do. When the plane finally landed back in Los Angeles, Snoop asked Tupac if he was heading to Las Vegas for the Mike Tyson fight. Tupac shut him out cold. That was the last conversation they ever had. 6 days later, Tupac was gone, and Snoop has never fully escaped the weight of that unresolved moment.
Because my nigga didn't say nothing to me the whole ride. And that's a 5-hour flight on a private plane.
Yeah.
So I walk up to him like maybe 3 hours into the flight, sit next to him like, you going to Vegas, cuz?
Admitting publicly that not patching things up with Tupac remains the biggest regret of his life. Now here's where it gets even darker. Suge Knight, currently behind bars serving a 28-year sentence, has been giving interviews from prison, and what he's been saying about Snoop Dogg is explosive. Knight claims that the emotional story Snoop told on Logan Paul's podcast in 2022 about visiting Tupac in the hospital after the Las Vegas shooting, seeing him intubated and nearly lifeless, even fainting at his bedside, never actually happened. According to Knight, Snoop was not at that hospital at all. He called it a flat-out lie.
If Snoop's going around saying he went to the hospital and had a conversation with Pac, that is a flat-out lie. The reason why that was a flat-out lie, Pac had already passed away.
And Knight didn't stop there. He also claimed that a source close to the situation told him Snoop had placed a bounty on Tupac in the lead up to his death, an allegation so serious and so unverified that it needs to be treated with extreme caution. Suge Knight is an incarcerated man with a documented history of making inflammatory claims, a long-running personal feud with Snoop, and every reason in the world to damage his former associate's reputation. None of his specific claims about a bounty have been independently confirmed by any credible source, but that hasn't stopped them from circulating, spreading, and feeding a narrative that refuses to die. And while Suge's claims live in the murky territory of rumor and allegation, the legal problems facing Snoop Dogg right now are very much on the record. In March 2025, a woman named Lydia Harris filed a lawsuit in Texas that sent shockwaves through the music industry. Harris claims she is one of the original co-founders of Death Row Records, alleging that she and her husband invested $1.5 million to help get the label off the ground back in 1989. According to her lawsuit, as Death Row grew into one of the most powerful and profitable labels in music history, she was systematically cut out of her rightful 50% share, and that Snoop Dogg, Suge Knight, Interscope Records, and music executive Jimmy Iovine all conspired to keep her from ever collecting.
And back in the day, about 30 years ago, it was them who invested the money that helped get Death Row Records started all that time ago. So Lydia Harris has a $100 million lawsuit against Snoop and Death Row Records.
A court had already sided with her back in 2005 to the tune of a $107 million judgment, money she has never seen a single dollar of. Her attorneys argue that Snoop's purchase of Death Row in 2022 added a new layer of complexity to her decades-long fight for what she's owed. Snoop's legal team hit back fast, calling the suit frivolous and arguing it is time-barred because more than 20 years have elapsed since the original judgment. The fight isn't over. On top of that, Snoop and Ice Cube are facing a separate $1.3 million fraud lawsuit from a company called Westside Merchandise, which claims the two rappers collected a massive upfront payment for their Mount Westmore supergroup, promised 60 concerts, showed up to only 3, and never returned the money. And closer to home, Snoop's own cousin, Daz Dillinger, one half of That Dog Pound, went public accusing Snoop of attempting to quietly trademark his music catalog without permission, allegedly to position Death Row's entire catalog for a $1 billion sale. When Daz went on social media to air it out, Snoop responded publicly, threatening to destroy him business-wise. It was messy, it was public, and it was a reminder that behind the cool exterior, there is a man fighting legal battles on multiple fronts simultaneously. So now we step back and look at the full picture. Because the Stranger Than Heaven controversy isn't just about one video game announcement, it fits into a much larger pattern that hip-hop fans have been watching for years. This is not the first time Snoop has brought Tupac back from the dead for a project. Back in 2012, Snoop was the driving force behind the now infamous Tupac hologram at Coachella, a technically stunning digital recreation that generated massive buzz and, once again, massive controversy about whether it was an act of tribute or a sophisticated revenue strategy. That same debate is playing out again right now, just with higher stakes and better technology. Some people believe that deceased artists should never appear in games, films, or digital recreations under any circumstances, arguing it is tasteless and deeply dystopian to digitize the dead for entertainment. Others insist that Tupac's own estate, which is controlled by people who actually loved him, including members of his own family, made this call, and that outsiders don't have the standing to override it. But the real tension that nobody wants to say out loud is this: Snoop Dogg is simultaneously the man who publicly carries the most grief over Tupac's death and the man who has built the most profitable ventures off Tupac's name and image. That contradiction is impossible to ignore. Whether you believe his motivations are pure or calculated, the fact remains that every time Tupac's likeness generates money, Snoop Dogg is somewhere nearby. Here's where we land. Snoop Dogg has spent 30 years constructing an empire. Death Row Records, Death Row Games, television deals, business ventures, Olympic torchbearer appearances. He has worked harder than almost anyone in his generation to stay relevant, stay powerful, and stay at the top. But no matter how big the empire gets, the same questions keep circling back. The unresolved fallout with Tupac, the legal battles piling up around Death Row, the family feuds breaking out into public view. The allegations, some in courtrooms, some whispered in hip-hop circles, that refuse to go away quietly. A video game bearing Tupac's face is just the latest flashpoint in a story that has never really had a resolution. Whether Stranger Than Heaven ends up being a beautiful tribute or the most controversial cash grab in gaming history, only time will tell. But one thing is certain, Snoop Dogg keeps finding new ways to keep Tupac alive. The real question the internet is asking is simple: who is that actually for? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Snoop is honoring his old friend, or is this something else entirely? Because this conversation is just getting started. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like this video to support the channel, subscribe to Rap Hot Insider for the latest updates, and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Until next time, peace out.